just the round table here, and I'm awaiting someone 1 hour ago, and she didn't show up. So I'm stuck here.
Okay. Well, that's looks like a good place to be stuck. And hello to Lucy. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
So where are you in the world?
I'm in North Sweden.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Very cold.
Very cold, I think, probably.
Yeah, very cold.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the south of France. It's a little bit cold, but not
Oh, wow.
not too bad.
Yeah. And this is the first time I've joined, so I'm curious if you all know each other, or if everyone is new to each other, or.
Well, we sort of know each other. Graham hasn't been here for quite a while, but has been here the last couple of times. But he was sort of a founding member. And Doug and Heiner have been here for a while, but it's not a requirement in any way that we know each other. It's both an experiment in getting to know each other and in seeing what happens when we don't, and still having a meaningful, deep conversation.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. And it's always an experiment, so it's a little different what happens. Today we're going to save the world. That's the plan. We got an hour.
Yeah, we need that.
We need that, yeah. So we just need to do it. So there are probably going to be other people who haven't been here before. I noticed for some reason people posted this event all over the place. So there might be some new names that are equally puzzled about what's going on here. Anyway, so we just take a couple of minutes here to do a quick check-in and see what's going on for people. Hello, Sam. Hello, and as usual, this is an experiment, so we don't necessarily know how to do it. Like we have the task here of making some kind of difference in an hour, and the question is how to do that. I can certainly think of some ways not doing that, like just going through some same old ritual probably wouldn't do it. Just sort of having a heated argument about whose idea of saving the world is better is probably not going to do it either. And we don't either quite have time to sort of check in and hear everybody's feelings and thoughts about everything in an hour. So somehow we need to do something else. Maybe look at it together, being present together, and I don't know, plug into what the world would be like after we potentially have saved it. Hello, Natalie. You're muted right now, but you can say hello if you want. I'll unmute you once I find the button here. Unmute. There it is. No, that didn't do it. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Where are you in the world?
I'm in London, UK.
Wonderful. Okay, and the rest of us are all over the place. It's quite possible there will be a lot of people today, but we'll see. And hello, Cheryl.
Hello.
And as usual, it's not necessarily that I have a plan or I'm going to tell you what to do. So the idea is that we together figure out what the right thing to do here is. And sometimes that's just being quiet. It doesn't have to be any like heavy duty plan or anything. And I don't know where we should start.
Let's start to say hello to Natalie. Natalie, we just met in Geneva last month, and it's a pleasure to see you again in the new year. Happy New Year. And I'm awfully sorry I didn't answer your email yet.
That's okay. Nice to see you again.
And I will
also say hi to Natalie and Graham and Lucy. I've not met you yet. And Cheryl, it's good to see you again. Doug, we talk every day, so I'm going to say hi a little bit on one-on-one.
So if nothing else, I invite you to look a little bit at what can a group of people do who are here online looking at each other at the same time, and we have a little bit of time together. What can we meaningfully do?
Fleming, it has slipped my mind, but was there a name or a topic that was suggested for today that I'm not actually remembering?
Yeah, that's why it's a little bit of a heavy duty sort of topic. The topic is save the world, and the idea is we have an hour. Is there something we together can do to make a difference? Can we save the world, and how might we take a definite step together in that direction?
Okay, I only have 3 seconds. Okay, I'll not say anything else.
But you're going to say something for 3 seconds?
Yes. But I'll say it later.
Okay.
I was going to say, make it good, but
Better be good.
Well, I have a thought. It's revolving around one of the other topics that we talked about a couple weeks ago, where we were. Oh, I forget the name of the topic. Well, anyway, my question is this. It seems like we brought up the idea, maybe Fleming did, a couple other people did, that one of the ways to save the world is by, working to make the world a better place right in your own little garden, your own little place in the world. And I kind of thought that probably for much of my life, maybe when you're younger, you don't feel like you can touch the whole world. And then you get to the point where you suddenly come to realize that being responsible for participating in the political process or, getting together with others to push this agenda in some way might be a responsibility that we have as adults to participate in more than community, even world and political things so that we have a better world. And then that brings up the question of, all the infighting and that you're just forever struggling. And then I think Fleming and a few other people brought up the idea that back to your own small place in the world, it might be the most effective way to do it. So I'm kind of rolling these ideas around in my mind because I had come to the idea, well, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and participate in the political thing and try to put my goodness out there in that way. And it just can deplete you, really, because you're, outnumbered so greatly. But almost relieved to run back to my own little neck of the woods. So the first thing is wrestling with that idea. And the second thing is that's kind of how our grandparents had it. They were doing a lot of what Fleming does. My grandparents were ballroom dancers. They went ballroom dancing every weekend, got their big dresses, did the things that they loved and did that with their people. And, they did make their little part of the world more beautiful with nice, fun things to do and inviting to the other people to come and join the goodness of the world, So I just wanted to kind of point out those things, and I'm hoping that we address some of that here today.
I would sort of lean in the Buckminster Fuller direction of the way to change the world is not to persuade everybody to do things differently, but it's to come up with something, invent something, or make a system, or make something locally that somehow makes a difference, like maybe a new tool, a new something that people like, and that other people, when they adopt it or use it, they act a little bit differently. So it's sort of an indirect way of changing the world, but potentially one with very high leverage, that you come up with something that we don't have to argue about. You don't have to persuade anybody. You just do something and other people like it, and it takes off from there. So to me, it's in part a mindset of maybe more deliberately coming up with things like that. I personally would like to be more deliberate at that, or more aware of what am I actually doing. I think part of what goes wrong is a lot of what we do is sort of very fussy. We're trying to sort of keep up with the news and what's going on, and we're not clear on what's our lever that we're moving. We're sort of jumping around between different things and hoping that somehow things change. Whereas if we pick even the smallest thing that we're working on, and that we're aware of, hey, I'm trying to do this thing that nobody else is thinking of, but I'm trying to do this thing, and you're making progress with that, I think that in itself is one of the best things we can do to change the world.
So I sort of have been finding myself turning that telescope around and coming at it from the idea of I'm an agent and contributor, and my contribution is defined by where I put my time and attention. And breaking out of the humans doing thing in service to the humans being thing first. I'm finding myself focusing on how do I be the best me as a contributor, as a community member, as a collaborator. And it's sort of like be the change in a modeling context. And I do a lot of these conversations because I think this is where the action is. So learning in these conversations and figuring out how to do them better or how to do them differently in service to the human beings in them first, then what's the collective thing that we may want to do together. But just as a case of first impression, how do we do us differently? And yesterday, in a conversation with a group of people, all very evolved and resonant with each other on a multitude of levels, it didn't stop somebody from popping up with a really negative experience that sort of came out of left field. And my reaction in response to that was, could that have been avoided somehow? Right? And how could that have been avoided? Or could that be handled or dealt with in a real-time moment way, in a here and now way, that was more human and more generative in service to the collective desire to create things, to improve things, to transform things. So I'm like really at the, crawl before you walk before you run. And actually, even before crawling, babies have to learn how to roll over. Like, that's the first step. And I sort of feel like we're in the rollover stage. Like, we're just beginning to figure out how to, work and play together and even talk to each other. And so I'm sort of at that square one as a full-time focus. Like, that's my thing right now. And I'm complete.
Here's my 3 seconds. Rather than saving the world, how would each of us think about growing up first? That's it.
Well, I resonate with both of those, Sam's perspective and Doug's, and it's also for me part of the reason for this group here, that instead of sort of rushing off to make big plans and what are we going to do together, we need to learn how can we even be present together. In my observation, most of what goes wrong in most endeavors is just communication difficulties. We don't know how to be and listen and speak, so we end up just fighting about ideas. So it's for me a very fundamental thing to be able to be present in a generative way, not just sit and do nothing, but be present in a way that's fertile for what wants to emerge. And I do want things to emerge, but I think it's wise to learn how to just be before anything else. Not that we need to wait, it sort of happens at the same time, but I agree with the fundamental idea. Let's grow up a little bit and be able to just be present adult people together, and yeah, then let's see what will happen. Preferably quickly, but at the same time, like we have all the time in the world. It's a bit of a paradox.
I decided a long time ago that I wasn't perfect. And I know really clearly that I'm not an immaculate creature. And in spite of not being a graceful person, I still feel that I would like to do things and to create change without feeling I'm perfect, because I'm not, and for some reason I don't aspire to be perfect either, but that's just myself.
I think there's a lot of mileage in that. Like a lot of what I think goes wrong with communication is us trying to be perfect, having the right answer, knowing what to do, telling other people what to do. Whereas the truth is we're not really sure, but we're working on it. And it's much more useful to look at the working on it, the things we don't have quite right, what's really going on. That takes us somewhere rather than having the answer. So I connect with that.
All of these, sorry, Cheryl. Okay. What you've all been saying resonates very strongly with me. I'm working very actively in trying to do the doing to make this change in the world in my own little corner. But it struck me that we can be, I guess it's in seeing myself and in seeing others that I'm working with, we can be so focused on what we're kind of doing out there and how we're trying to change everyone else that we totally miss all of these opportunities which are so close to us, in our community, for example, Doug, like you said, and in the people we work with. And I think this connects also to what you said, Natalie, about not being perfect, and that extends it's not just about ourselves, it extends to others. How do we relate in these contexts where we're interacting and trying to transform things? And some of the interactions I'm part of can be quite brutal, how people will bash each other over ideas or bash themselves over their lack of progress and frustration. So I've been reflecting a lot on how do I show up when I'm in these situations of work? And how do I be in my own life? What energy do I carry with me when I go out the door? How do I interact with people? And I mean, it feels like there's a connection, that we are little dominoes and we can knock on the next domino, and who knows how far around the world that goes. And for me, carrying that thought with me is gives me more hope that I'm actually making a difference than my actual doing work at times. Yeah, so this in itself is encouraging to know that if other people are thinking these ways, then maybe I'm on the right track, and that my, you know, that maybe by my being, I am making some of this change.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lucy.
in reference to what Natalie was saying, I struggled to get a cardboard box in the recycling this afternoon. So I was just reminded, laughing at myself about this conversation, and then not being able to do that. But for me, it's about, one of the things is balance, and how there's a lovely, Tom Atlee said that the world's getting better and better, worse and worse, faster and faster. So I really like that way of seeing there's lots of great stuff, lots of not great, and it seems to be speeding up. And that I can give my attention to the good stuff whilst ignoring or conveniently forgetting the things that are, for me, that I find too painful to look at sometimes, and I get then depressed, and then I become completely useless to anybody. So it's that balance of, I think someone said as well in the past, enjoying the world or savoring it, or you save it. So there's both. You have to enjoy the world, but then we also have to look after it. So I think that, for me, the essence is balance. And the second thing that comes to mind is, I was told, I'm not sure if it's true, but I like the story anyway, and it was that
What?
What a perfectly timed interruption.
What a cliffhanger. We don't know what happened. Oh, we lost. You disappeared when you were about to tell us the story.
Am I back again?
You're back, yes.
So what I was going to say was, and I'm not saying that communism is the answer. What I'm saying is that the students met, and after days and days of discussion and argument, the only thing they could agree on was they would all stick together. That no matter what, they would keep meeting and keep talking until they knew what to do. So it wasn't that there was a simple answer. They just said, I commit to standing by your side. So I suppose no matter what, I commit to these meetings, I commit to standing by you guys' side.
We lost you again.
Maybe I can jump in.
Yeah, you can jump in. I think he got the point of the story. So go ahead, Heiner.
Graham, I liked your point, because the School of Ignorance coming out as a Bohm dialogue was being together for a week, and when it's running out, the others are following him. And we went through incredible catharsis and whatever. So the exercise of being together here in a group, in a conversation, is really challenging. And I want to go back to Doug. I think what we have been experiencing yesterday and what we are doing here as a conversation experiment is very embryonic, very, very not even born yet. Because all the expectations, assumptions, things we might have heard or intended or mean but did not say, it is already difficult when we are together in a group. But in a virtual group, where we cannot check through a glimpse of an eye, has he got it? Is he with me? Where is he? Is really the problem. But I want to go back to the original statement Cheryl was putting out. Because I think when we want to save the world, we have to make sure what do we want to save. In German, Erde can be soil and can be planet Earth. So you see, in our thinking, it is across scales. And I think this is very important, because what I heard in Cheryl's word was, I'm small, I cannot grab the world. I had these discussions with director generals of UNESCO, and they always say, everybody knows we cannot have the big picture. We have to do our small thing. And in the rest, we have the commandments, we have the belief systems, we have the gods and the popes. Leave it to someone else. And I think this is our own making ourselves small. I think we can grasp the world. We can grow and grok, trying to understand the world. And so in German, again, it's easy because we have sehen und schauen. To see is physically with the eye, but like a Weltanschauung is a deeper embodied reflection. And to really make this all possible, now we are thrown here into this embryonic exercise of trying to learn something in a group which could not meet like this in the physical world. And so it's a very unique opportunity. And that's why I'm very happy to be here with you guys. Over.
You know, Lucy, you mentioned the affirmation that maybe you're doing okay, and there are other people that are experientially in the same frame. And I actually believe these conversations, in terms of affecting the field at large, are very, very generative and very powerful, and they're creating ripples. The ripples aren't visible or sensorily aware, you know, within our event horizon. To be aware of them, to see them, and I suspect sometime millennia ago, people did see those things. We lost that. But I think there's a real power, intangible, invisible, but substantive and meaningful and significant in the scheme of the world. And I don't think we're alone. I think there are tens of thousands of these happening. And there was a sharing. Fritjof Capra did a brief video sharing, and he mentioned the sort of inflection point in South Africa, and leading up to the change of leaders from, I think it was Botha de Klerk or whoever. I'm really bad with names and terrible with history. But at the inflection point leading to the collapse of apartheid, leading up to that, there were tons and tons and tons of secret small group meetings happening all over South Africa, discussing South Africa post-apartheid. What would that look like? What would that be like? How would we do? What would we say? How would we relate? How would we change? And that all of that, when the leadership changed, was energetically responsible for post-leadership change toppling of apartheid. And I think these work the same way. And the one thing I feel very comfortable with is that my doing this is material, meaningful, valuable contribution on my part to the greater grander, and I don't have to question that. I can know that. So I just wanted to share that. I'm complete.
There's a thing that came to me a little earlier in our conversation of that essentially there's a type of doing that's closer to being. Like doing doesn't have to mean get a big plan and rush out and do something. There's a doing that's just, this is what I feel like doing. Like Cheryl mentioned, I go dancing. Does that change the world? What's the plan? Where does that go? But it's what feels right for me. So they're doings that are really just your own path, or this is what feels right. It's you becoming something more. You're following a path of your own, which involves a doing. There's something you do that might not very obviously or directly contribute to changing the world, but I think it really does, because it's part of being more present, being aware of what's the right thing to do. Very often that's something intuitive, feeling wise. It's not a direct answer to how do we save the world. But I think that if more of us do that more of the time, all the threads weaving together will somehow make a huge difference. So instead of spending all of our energy on making the plan for what we should do or what somebody else should do, if we can be more busy on doing what it is that flows for us, which is not nothing, it's not just sitting doing nothing, it's some kind of activity like we're doing here. This is a doing. And there, if we can weave in the other things we do in our lives that maybe don't seem obviously relevant, but that are, because it's what drives us, what excites us at the moment. It's what we do. Maybe there's things we do that are not exciting at all, to taking out the recycling, but it's what we do, and it weaves in. So I think there's a doing and being that's nicely interwoven, and which is very essential to what's happening here.
I was with one group some decades ago, and they assumed that they were like the monks or nuns that sat on a mountain, and they held the space for change. They may or may not have done things that created change as well, but they held the intention of change. And I think that's necessary. And if we just do that, that's fine. But I would still like to do more than sit. I would like to aggravate academia and universities and medical schools. So I would like to do more now, but I don't know whether it's effective or whether just trying is enough.
I suppose there are different kinds of trying. There's a type of trying which really is doing it, even if it might or might not sort of get the result you're aiming at, but if you're present with your trying. I think there are other kinds of trying, which is more like you do what you should be doing or what somebody else tells you to do, but you don't feel it. That might a little more be a waste of time. But I think there's no shame in trying if it's really your own trying, so to speak.
When you said that, Natalie, what came to mind for me was poking the bear. And I'm a firm believer in poking the bear. If you're moved to poke the bear, poke the bear. And because I think there's a whole package of belief systems that we're programmed with, the whole too big to fail and the whole it's hopeless because of the momentum and the scale and the size and the power and all of that stuff. And I think that's mythology that's has programmed us to just be suppressed and be compliant. And I don't think it's true. I don't think any of it's true. And all of it is subject to being poked. And history is rife with individuals that decided to poke the bear and didn't stop until the bear got out of their way. And it was usually only one person, like one person here, one person there, and then somebody else said, oh, okay, I'll poke with you. and the rest is history. So who knows at what point any one of us in any context in the process of poking our bear starts getting the bear to move and starts having other people go, I'll help. And so the intrinsic potential is unlimited for any one of us. Always.
Is it poking the bear or the ball?
The bear. Bear.
Yes. But you see, when you go to trading, you have the bulls and the bears. And don't we need to poke both?
Poke the what? What's the first thing you want to poke?
If you go to a trading place, like for Aktien, public money, world trade,
You're talking about in
New York
markets.
trade
Bulls
exchange.
and bear investors.
Yes, yes. Shouldn't
Oh,
we pull
I
both?
I look at all of that as one thing that needs to be poked out of existence. I don't distinguish between those two. The whole thing deserves to be consigned to the obsolescence heap of culture in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think other little micro stories. One is that I find it very useful to be able to tell stories to other people. So if I'm in a cafe, I can say, well, you know, there's group meets online, there's a guy in Latvia, there's this guy in South Africa, there's someone over there in Brazil. And at least I can tell.
Tell what?
And my least favorite, I love it and I don't like it at all. And I was nervous before coming on. I felt a bit sick, but I feel that there's some sort of coherence already. And I think these meetings are just are microcosms of the macrocosm. And if we can do it even with two people, then it just, as you said, I think, Doug, it ripples out. And I'll finish this, but I just love that. I'm not sure if it's a myth or not, but the lily pond is half full and the next day it's full. So we just don't know how quickly things can shift. And so, you know, little anecdotes, quotes, stories, I think they help me keep my head above water.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like one thing we share between us, which is maybe hard to put a word on. I certainly wouldn't call it optimism, but there's seems to me a certain shared idea of what we're connecting with is the stuff that has changed, or it's like a belief in that it's possible to shift things, and there's sort of another world there. Around the world, on the internet, on Facebook, and so forth, lots of people are talking from a much more pessimistic place, that it is already sort of lost. They're sort of arguing for like suicide, essentially, and we're not doing that here. So I don't know what to call it. We have different views on it, I'm sure, but we seem to be talking about what's on the other side of some kind of change, and we seem to share a connection with that in different ways, which I think should be noted. And so just be able to, like you said, Doug, I forgot how you put it, but I mean, like with the apartheid, I mean, talking about what is it sort of after we fix it. And it's not even that we talk much about how is the future going to be, but we talk as if we're part of it, I think, and that's important.
I think that's really true. what you said, Fleming, about the pessimism. And I think that comes back to what Doug said also about these stories we've been told, you know, for a very, very long time. And this influences the dialogue so much. And, you know, what solutions we're even talking about, that things are so big and how much can one person do, and, you know, what actually creates change. And then that, I mean, this is maybe a bit random, but that just connects me to this poking the bear. And I think sometimes our pokes are so gentle, and we have to, you know, we have to get a big stick and like ram it right in its eye sometimes if we're gonna, you know, I just see it myself with my own work, or even interactions with other people. How daring am I willing to be? And what these conversations give me is our, you know, feeling that I'm part of something bigger, feeling this optimism, and feeling like, well, really, I have nothing to lose. I may as well just grab that stick and poke as hard as I can, because what's the alternative? Yeah, so for me, that's just like connecting these pieces of what we're doing here, why we're doing it, and how could we maybe do it better.
I'm going to violate my 3-second rule. I think the world is going to be fine. What we're all worried about is not the world so much as whether or not our progeny is going to be around, and whether or not they're going to be spiders and insects, or whether they're going to be human people. So we all know that multiple civilizations have come and gone because they couldn't solve the challenges that eventually faced them, that they probably created on their own. So here we are again with that same opportunity, same privilege, same responsibility, and we think we have advantages that those previous civilizations didn't have, you know, whether it's the DNA structure, whether it's lasers, whether it's the internet, you know, we think we have these things that other civilizations didn't have. But in Rebecca Costa's book, it wasn't food or shelter or anything else that really caused these civilizations to fall. It was a measure of complexity that they could not handle. And it all came down to complexity, because complexity is a description of capacity. It's not a description of the system itself. So our challenge is whether or not we can grow up and learn how to deal with these things, or do the responsible thing, which is make way for some other species which can do a better job. So if we look at it that way, I'm actually quite relaxed. It's up to us, and we get to make it or we get to break it. Too many world efforts, I think, are done in a very shallow fashion. You know, somebody wakes up, gets to high school, gets to college, sees a problem in the world, goes rushing off to go save the world by solving that problem. We don't yet have a big enough view, a big enough systemic view. Because, you know, if somebody solves malaria, like Bill Gates, you know, in a few years, so what? We still have 16 or 17 other things that threaten us. So these individual actions, while well-meaning, aren't really going to do it. And it's not a hierarchical top-down thing I'm proposing. Definitely not. You know, those of you that have been in conversations with me know that's not what I profess. But I do profess there's a greater visioning, a greater valuing, that Doug might actually say, that we need to in some way promote and share and communicate and learn. Because these small individual actions, uncoordinated, are Brownian motion. And we got to grow up. Over.
It is sort of the most arrogant conceit that we as a species believe we're in control of everything. Like, we went off the rails when that became the power dynamic of our species and our evolution culturally, right? And, you know, David Bohm had classic part of one of his conversations where he said, you know, there are all these scientists, and each time they come up with a new discovery, it's the discovery. And it's everything, you know. And so the geneticists have figured it all out until all of a sudden the epigeneticists figure out the software that runs the hardware, and the geneticists look like auto mechanics. And we're so far away from any comprehensive and clear understanding of how it all works. And right outside our window in nature, we have the perfect model to study and learn from, and we ignore it and try to tame it. You know, like it's all backwards. So, you know, the sixth global extinction, the geologic record said if 80% of the species are eradicated, everything goes. Like the extinction event is inevitable. And we have no idea how close or far away we are from that tipping point. But we do know that we're burning through species and species populations like race car and ethanol. And biology is going to make that decision in the face of our choices for us, and we're not going to have any control over it. So yeah, it's sort of like we're not here that long, and I got so many hours in a day and so many years left, and the only scope of control I have is over my contribution. And so where do I choose to make that? And I find myself more and more seeing the value, Graham, to your point about connection, that it's like they don't have the answer, but they're all in it together. And I think that's sort of the road, you know, that's the map, right? That like if we all can get connected and recognize our common human being reality and experience in each other, like that's a step in the right direction. The whole sort of industrial competition and separation and alienation of each of us from the others, which is the current sort of cultural imprint and setup, is the enemy. And our just connecting and starting to pull in the same direction and care for each other is a huge paradigm change, like very powerful paradigm shift in and of itself. And you know, Sam, your point about all these initiatives, when Bill Gates launched his anti-malaria campaign, I'm like, yo, so you're distributing nets. What are you doing about the disappearance of amphibious populations who are the natural control of mosquitoes? Like the frogs are disappearing all over the world. And it's like, you're missing the point with your nets. The ecosystem's in trouble. And, but I think we recognize each other in each other, and I have huge trust and faith and belief in human beings being the generative source of our salvation, bottom up. That doesn't mean one solution. It doesn't mean one movement. It doesn't mean one big thing. It means individuals on a local community, collective, collaborative basis being given voice and connection and ability to contribute, like just that as a starting place, has a better chance, I believe, of mapping us to survival than just about anything else. And I have no idea what that looks like what they'll come up with individually, collectively. But I have faith and trust in them that they'll come up with good stuff if they're given the safety and the means to have a voice and to contribute. Like really basic stuff.
Well, it seems to me that, well, David Bohm was talking about how we solve a problem and then we inadvertently create another problem because we're not thinking globally enough. We're just thinking locally. Imagine the United States solving a problem for itself that didn't help the rest of the world one bit or made it worse. So what he's saying is then we invent a problem to solve the problem that we created. And basically, this sounds to me like a top-down viewpoint, really looking at the big picture before we start all doing our individual little things like Bill Gates solving, the vaccine problem or whatever he's doing. And then when I look at what you were saying about Bill Gates and everybody solving these little problems, that's working locally. So maybe the frog people are solving the frog problems and the chemists are solving vaccines and, everybody's doing their own thing and then maybe it'll come together. But I think it kind of has to come from top down and from bottom up, because we can't just look so locally that we don't see the knock-on effects of what we're doing that go out into the world that we think we solved a small problem. Like coming out of college and deciding we're going to run off and solve something when we don't have the big picture yet because we have no perspective with the young age, And then I also get this feeling of an urgency because you think everyone's working in their own little sphere, maybe to try to save the world or do something good. And hopefully the spheres grow and grow until they touch each other and all kind of blend together and it's a better world. But then maybe there's an emergency feeling that what if they don't touch each other fast enough and very bad things happen? So do you really have to start poking the bear? Do you really have to start getting out there and not being in your comfort zone and, not working too small, not working too locally because maybe there's an emergency? I don't know how to balance all these things, but I see them all as needing to be balanced.
Cheryl, this balancing of scales, micro, meso, macro, across sectors and times and cultures, is on my agenda since 30 years. I think it is not about touching, but seeing the overlap and where it is not overlapping and what is outside of the frame of references. All this is there. We have been building it. It is called local, only as one word. So it is possibly to really do this mind shift or rule set reset, to really find words to help us more clearly and concretely contextualize what it is about, and not be just in the macroscope or in the microscope, but roam and pan and zoom. So I was building it 1990, and sometimes it's picking up, but it's much too slow. And sometimes maybe it falls on fertile grounds.
So there's the possibility of seeing more of the bigger picture without it necessarily being attached to what instantly needs to be done about it. It doesn't have to be, well, we need a top-down thing. You see what should be done and then you make everybody do it. Potentially the seeing could be a little bit more detached or non-attached, at least, that if more of us could see what's going on without it instantly meaning elect another party or make this world law or something. I mean, sure, big things could be done, but just the act of seeing for more people will in itself make a difference, I think. And that's, I think, in part what Heiner is talking about, models and tools for seeing what's going on and for more people participating in that.
Yes, but not only seeing, but also feeling, touching, grasping. Because the real challenge is to leave a single viewpoint, a single position out, and be relaxed by stepping back. All the traditions tell us, take your own viewpoint out, but we are not taught this in school. We cannot have the big picture, we have to struggle, and there are commandments. So I think we have to be more relaxed and go into a multimodal coexistence without immediately feeling on being on the fire spot or grill.
When the world was a simpler place, that shared vision was somewhat fed to us with a free press. Now we have the internet, we have more information sharing possible than ever before in history, and yet we don't have an objective free press. And it's been corrupted by powers who control the agenda. So the way to get that shared vision is to poke that bear. We got to poke that bear and poke it hard. The other bear we got to poke, and I see somebody poking really hard and I'm trying to help that person as much as possible, and this is going to turn political, is Bernie Sanders. He's poking a bear. And I've gone on record as saying I would personally volunteer for Bernie Sanders' personal bodyguard corps because I think he's going to get shot because he's poking the bear. That's how hard we have to poke.
And I also want to say that I saw this in another meeting, and I don't want to bring up any specifics, but it really, really made me think for a week. And that is, people are already afraid to broach certain topics. They really are. We're talking internationally here. That means that anyone can listen in, you know. So, you know, I think we're all in the back of our mind a little cognizant of what we might say, and maybe a little protective, or even scared to broach certain topics. And that's poking the bear in a way that could get us on some surveillance or whatever, you know? And I think, and it's really sad, it made me sad for a whole week because I was just thinking, wow, people are already afraid of certain topics, already steering clear to safer ways of putting things. And I don't know, that this really, it was just a wake-up call. And I don't have a conclusion for that either, but I think it's part of it it's just part of the situation that has to be thought about.
I think part of what makes this work or could make this work is a certain non-attachment, which potentially is a bit of an answer to that. That however urgent lots of things are, and they are very, very urgent, and we're talking about very serious things, and however passionate we are about it, there's a certain something that comes out of, at the same time, paradoxically being non-attached to it. So this is a little bit like the restaurant at the end of the universe. We're sort of sitting here watching the end of potentially human life as we know it, although preferably not. But if it comes to that, we can still be present with it, and that would still serve for something, I believe. But I think also by the very act of being able to be present with very big things and very small things, we change the course of what happens. And it's paradoxical. It's not that we shouldn't feel it's urgent or we shouldn't be passionate, but at the same time, there's a certain, in French, one would say recul, like you can sort of take a step back, see it a little bit from a distance. You can still act about it, but you're not like all panicking and freaking out about it. We probably are most productive if we're not panicking, but at the same time seeing what's going on and choosing where we can best do our particular thing. And I think that's part of what's sort of the soul of this kind of group, that we can do that. And in principle, it could be an answer to be able to talk about anything because we're not too attached to it. So somehow.
I was really hoping that you guys would have sorted it all out. Sorry I came late, but I was like, yes, good. And I just want to tag on one of the bears, the press bear. And that fear that you were talking about, Cheryl, as well, you know, it's like the Panopticon has done really well for itself. And in terms of the Panopticon, for those that don't know, there was a camera in jail that basically, even if people weren't being watched, it held them in place and not doing stuff they shouldn't do. So we've got a global Panopticon going on right now that was supercharged by Edward Snowden's work that he did in 2013. And we're still living with that. And we can say whatever we want to, but there is a social construct that is kind of telling us that if we do poke the real bears, as Sam says, Bernie might get shot, right? Like, these are things that play in our psyche and confuse the inner machine works, so that we're not able to speak as clearly as we need to speak about the challenges that we face. And I feel like the work that we do here and in other places where we have these beautiful generative conversations is we give each other permission to say what we really think and unpack the bigger picture and the smaller details in such a way that we bridge understanding and take small steps towards that the capacities that we need to be able to really meet the challenges that we have. I think it's important work, and none of us can see all of it. You know, we get our pictures that we have, we share and have resonance with others, and the picture is in fact too big to grok fully. And I think that the work that we do helps us to build that message.
Tammy, for that I brought you some energy or some fire. And I think what we're doing here is moving more than desk chairs at the Titanic, but trying to be as frank and open as we can and still be aware of everything we just learned. So it's a really challenging, awesome time.
I just want to mention that we've reached the top of the hour, so we can start sort of bridging into how did this work? How much did we save the world here in this hour?
I have to go now very quickly, so thanks, Sam, for the typing or recording the conversation. And this felt like a very long hour. It did really, me personally, when time slowed down, and sunset's behind me. So thank you all, and yeah, until the next one.
I'll check out with two thoughts. One is we are saving the world by making these connections more strong and by understanding each other. Sorry, I apologize. Anyway, the sense of community that I think we can build goes a long way, because that's modeling what we want to live in. And the second idea is we know that, and this is a theme that Tammy brings up a lot, is this power and distribution of power and how we share power. Power gets easily corrupted when there is secrecy and when there is darkness. So what I'm wondering about is the solution, quote unquote, in transparency? And if it is, do we require absolute transparency? Because even the smallest amount of secrecy is enough to corrupt some power. So I'm just trying to wonder about where that is a balance that we can think about. Over.
Sam, does that include privacy?
I think we have to ask that question, yes.
It's a tangle.
Well, I felt this was probably one of the most, I could say, productive meetings we've had, even though productive is the wrong term and it's sort of industrial, Doug, I know that. But I feel actually we sort of got somewhere, and we got some of the vibe or the substance that's needed to save the world, or the substrate, or the connective tissue, whatever we call it. So I'm quite happy with that. We didn't turn into a plan or anything like that, but there was not either any kind of conflict. I sort of half expected that some people would show up who would be very sort of angry and passionate about their plan for saving the world, and we would spend half of the time sort of dealing with that, but that's not what happened. This was really sort of quiet and connected, which I really like.
I was also sometimes with Fleming now in this exercise. And I also especially liked it between this atmosphere of where I'm now, interreligious, intercultural peace, and between the seasons. So it's like all Christmas. So I enjoyed it very much. I excuse for playing with fire and to evacuate, because some people now have this place at the chimney and I'm out in the cold. But it's still very nice here, and I hope to stay in touch. And over for now. Bye.
So for me, what Fleming said.
And I'd like to thank Graham for inviting me. And it was good to meet you, and I didn't know what to expect. And I hope I see you another time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I would agree with you, Fleming, also. I think this feels like this was really productive and positive, and I also didn't know what to expect. I've never joined you all before, but this was, on a personal level, this was exactly what I needed. And I'll be looking forward very much to joining again in the future. So thank you, all of you. And I have to ask, what's this? Is this just agreeing, saying me too? Or?
This is like, sort of applauding. It comes from Occupy Wall Street. It's sort of like,
okay.
Yeah, we agree, this is cool. So it's sort of a silent way of showing you're with it.
Okay, perfect.
I thought it was jazz hands.
You could say jazz hands. Yeah.
That's what people call it.
You know, the other thing that keeps coming into mind, and we don't have to discuss this, is that we're a pretty siloed group. So it's kind of a little easier in that way, and maybe even a little easier or a little more difficult to dissent at all in our thoughts, because there's a lot of kind of higher consciousness, kind of everyone's like that.
I don't know if I would call us silent, but we're
Siloed.
Silo. Okay, I thought you said we were silent. I got it.
No. Siloed.
This is a conversation place. No, but I'm curious as to what you mean by siloed.
Well, what I mean is, I detect, no matter who the group is, a lot of the same people, sometimes new people. We're all kind of on the higher consciousness bend. So we're not really having to deal with the difficult people, we'll say, which is in the real world, that's huge, So this is a lot easier.
Sort of conversational Disneyland. You know that feeling when you spend a week at Disneyland and then you check out and you go to the Orlando airport and it's
That's
like,
it.
oh my God,
Mhm.
What happened? Yeah, this is definitely like Disneyland.
Cheryl, Tammy, and Doug and Heiner can attest to me being pokey at times, so I just was less pokey today than others.
You were.
I'm holding back.
Well,
Don't hold back, Cheryl. Don't hold back.
No need to hold back. I should say also that previously in sort of the history of the conversational experiments, we've gone through more sort of difficulties of various kinds and maybe had more people show up that were problematic for one reason or another. So that was sort of part of the learning experience. I don't know why it's not happening now, maybe because the group spirit somehow evolved. I'm not sure. But there are surprisingly few people showing up and making a havoc out of the events here. That doesn't really happen anymore. It could happen, but maybe we're ready for it. I don't know.
I think it is setting an example. And if the majority is like listening, compassionate, and not struggling for the talking stick, but leaving it in the center, then you can do any kinds of distribution and everybody is still all eyes and ears.
I know we're concluding, but I have to add 5 more seconds, Cheryl. This point about safety starts, I think, with political correctness. And I think PC has killed some of that safety just by grinding away slowly, bit by bit. And I think that prevents us from really being that authentic and that sincere and that high integrity. And I think that's very dangerous.
I could not agree more.
Any other closing remarks before we finish?
That what Sam and Cheryl were just excited about seems like an interesting seed for a next session.
That's just what I thought. So yeah, some kind of talk about things we shouldn't talk about thing. I don't know what exactly, but
We won't be able to talk about it.
Oh, well, that's a problem then. Well, I'll try to provoke something. Anyway,
I'll just ask questions, Cheryl.
Yeah, that's one way. So anyway, thank you all for coming. I thought this was lovely. See you again in one way or another. Pleasure to share this space with you. Take care, have a lovely time, and catch you another time for another lovely conversation. Goodbye.